Good morning. So, what I'm going to talk to you about this morning is our fifth perinatal confidential inquiry. Now, the topic for this particular inquiry was selected by our independent advisory group, this was following a call for topic proposals. Now, originally, the funding meant that we could only focus on Black women, but we later managed to identify some additional funding, which meant that we were able to add Asian women in partway through. And that meant we could run both inquiries at the same time. However, we are presenting separate reports today, although you will see the findings together. But this is just to ensure that nuanced differences can be properly highlighted. So just a quick reminder of the context of that original topic choice. So at the time of the development of this inquiry in 2019, compared to babies of white ethnicity, Asian babies had a 57% increased risk of stillbirth and a 59% increased risk of neonatal death. And for Black babies, this was a 124% increased risk of stillbirth and a 43% increased risk of neonatal death. And this difference in risk increases with deprivation. And as Ruth has just shown, more recently published data shows that this hasn't improved. So I'll just take a quick overview of the process of the confidential inquiry. So first of all, we will take a sample of women and babies who meet the inquiry criteria for that particular year. And this is generally sampled from the MBRRACE surveillance data, which we collect annually. Anonymized medical notes are then reviewed by a panel of experts to reach a consensus view of the care provided. The care is graded along the care pathway, and there's also an overall grading of care for the mother and the baby. As part of the development of this inquiry, we met with a group of stakeholders to ensure that we were asking the right questions. This was then fed into the topic expert group, which was made up of clinicians with an interest or expertise in health inequalities, in order to agree a set of standards against which care would be reviewed. And we also recruited a broad multidisciplinary panel of clinicians to sit on the review panels. So the aims of the inquiry were, first of all, to assess adherence to clinical guidelines and the standard of care provision throughout the care pathway, to identify improvements, so that meant identifying both poor and good care, to find out if improvements in care would have resulted in a different outcome, and to pull out lessons for future care. And these would be agreed by consensus, and a grading of care would be given along the care pathway and for each mother and baby. The deaths reviewed by this inquiry were from singleton pregnancies. The mother's ethnicity was Asian, Black, or white, and this was the ethnicity that was reported to us, so it may not necessarily be the same as the woman's self-reported ethnicity. These babies were born in the second half of 2019, and this was to avoid the added complexity of changes in service provision during the early stages of the pandemic. The babies were born at 24 weeks or later, and they died either before or within 28 days of birth. So from this group of eligible pregnancies, we took a random sample, and we sampled 50 mother-baby pairs from each ethnic group. And over the course of 22 panel meetings, we reviewed these deaths until no new themes were emerging. So this resulted in the review of 34 Asian, 36 Black, and 35 white mother-baby pairs. So prior to these meetings, the team here in Leicester send out requests for notes to all the hospitals that provided care for the mother and baby. These are checked for completeness and organised into a logical order by the MBRRACE team. And then anonymised notes are made available to panel members 3 to 4 weeks prior to the panel meeting via a secure online system. A small number of deaths, usually 4 or 5, are then reviewed at each panel meeting by a multidisciplinary group in order to reach a consensus view of the care. The panel considered all the care that women and babies receive from booking all the way up until the follow-up meeting and the local review. And each point along the care pathway, the panel identified any care issues and graded them accordingly. So it may be no issues, that's good quality care identified at that particular point. There may be minor issues, significant issues, or major issues. And at the end of the discussion of each death, the panel then agreed an overall grading for the baby. So would different care have changed whether the baby died or how the baby died? And also for the mother. So would different care have changed the mother's experience of the death of her baby and her future health and well-being? We also collected additional factual data via checklists to provide some additional context. And this information was then combined with the consensus valuation data to provide a detailed data set for each mother and baby. This data was then analysed to identify key themes, which form the basis of the reports we're presenting today. Now, it's important to mention here that because the inquiry process is based on a review of the medical notes, and there is no direct communication with the mothers and families or with healthcare professionals, it can't identify differences in care which may have occurred but were not documented. We also didn't have access to information about the organisational structure, practice, or culture of each hospital. And a consequence of that is that the woman's voice is rarely in the notes. And the nature of a confidential inquiry means that we can't seek it out either. So this afternoon, to help provide that perspective, you'll hear from SANS, who have been talking to Black and Asian bereaved parents. So before handing over to Sarah, I'll just give you a general overview of the key findings. So these are the overall gradings of care agreed by the panels for both the mother and the baby. So in terms of care for the baby, and this is for the Asian group, improvements in care were identified which may have made a difference to the outcome for the baby for 26% of Asian women and 49% of white women. And in terms of care for the mother, improvements in care were identified which may have made a difference to the outcome for the mother in 59% of Asian women and 69% of white women. For Black women, improvements in care were identified which may have made a difference to the outcome for the baby for 42% of Black women compared with 49% of white women. And in terms of care for the mother, there were improvements in care identified which may have made a difference to the outcome for the mother in 61% of Black women compared with 69% of white women.